Our reading this morning is Joshua chapter 2 from the NIV. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. "Go, look over the land," he said, "especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute, elsewhere translated an innkeeper, named Rahab, and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." But she'd taken them up on the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in the pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up to the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts sank and everyone's courage failed because of you, for the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you'll spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men assured her. "If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Now she had said to them, "Go to the hills, so that the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourself for 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." The men said to her, "This oath you have made us swear will not be binding on us unless when we enter the land you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers and all your family into your house. If anyone goes outside your house into the street, his blood will be on his own head, and we will not be responsible. As for anyone who is in your house with you, his blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on him. But if you tell what we're doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they parted, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills and forded the river and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us."
I like listening to scripture being read. I read so much during the week. It's just nice to listen. Let's pray to start. I think of the words of Psalm 27, Lord. Teach us your ways, O Lord, and lead us on a level path. Thank you that you are a teacher and that you do lead us. And just pray, Lord, that you would make our way straight. Thanks for our kids and our helpers, Lord. Just pray a special blessing for them at this time too. Amen. About 6 years ago, I, as some of you know, took the train across Canada. I started in Vancouver and I finished in Halifax. It was 6 days on the train, I think, 6 days. But I had stops along the way, so it was about a 2-week trip. It was amazing. My favorite place that I visited on the trip, speaking of Quebec, was Quebec City. I had never been out east before, and I just loved it. I found Quebec City particularly fascinating and beautiful. One of the things about Quebec City, and that I didn't know before, is it's the only walled city north of Mexico. So there's a kind of this fortification all around the old city, and cannons still from a bygone era still positioned on the wall or in front of the Chateau Frontenac or whatever. And it may also be the oldest city in North America. I bought a t-shirt, it says Quebec City, first city. Jericho, the city mentioned in Joshua 2, is also a walled city. Made me think of Quebec City. In fact, archaeology has discovered at Jericho not one wall around the city, but two. An inner city wall measuring 1.5 meters wide, and then just beyond that, an outer city wall. So this is a well-fortified city inside and out. And while Quebec City may be the oldest city in North America, roughly 400 years old, Jericho is believed to be the oldest city in the world. It would have been really old even at the time of Joshua. And Jericho is also the lowest city in the world. Did you know that? Located 229 meters below sea level, not far from the Dead Sea, in what is called the Dead Sea Rift. The Dead Sea Rift is a fault line running from Turkey down to the Red Sea. And the word Jericho means moon. That's what in Hebrew Yericho is moon in Hebrew, suggesting the city was probably devoted to the moon god in ancient times. Now, Jericho is the first city the Israelites encounter in the promised land. So what Joshua does is he sends 2 spies in advance to glean information about the city. 2 spies, I wonder if because when Moses sent 12 spies 40 years earlier, only 2 came back with a favorable report. And we're told Joshua sends these 2 spies secretly. Interesting, he sends them secretly. Why? Apparently, Joshua doesn't want the Israelites to know he's sending out spies. Maybe it's because he doesn't want the people to get disheartened if the spies bring back a demoralizing report, like the first time. So he sends them secretly. And these two spies, we're told, entered Jericho, and they come to the house of a person named Rahab. Now there's 4 things we know about Rahab. 1, we know Rahab is a Canaanite. She's an inhabitant of the land. 2, we know Rahab lives in the city wall, and that will be significant and helpful in this story. 3, we know Rahab's profession is a prostitute. And 4, her name, Rahab, may be derived from a dragon sea creature found in Egyptian mythology, and which is sometimes referred to in the Old Testament. Isaiah 51, "Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake, as in days of old, the generations of long ago. Was it not you who cut Rahab in pieces, who pierced that dragon?" Psalm 89, "You crushed Rahab like a carcass. You scattered your enemies with your mighty arm." Job 26, "By his power he stilled the sea. By his understanding he shattered Rahab." Now, wanting to be discreet, these 2 spies find lodging at Rahab's house, hoping they might go unnoticed. Unfortunately, it doesn't go as planned. For apparently, the king of Jericho has surveillance of his own. And why not? After all, the Israelites are camped just across the Jordan River. He can maybe see them. And he probably has his own scouts on the lookout, tracing these men. So after receiving word about the spies, the king of Jericho sends messengers to Rahab's house demanding, "Bring out the men who have come to you, for they have come to search out all the land." Literally, it says, they have come to dig up all the land. They're searching for something. Now, according to ancient Near Eastern law, Rahab is legally bound to turn in these spies. Hammurabi's Code, which is a prominent legal document from this time, states, "If there should be a woman innkeeper in whose house criminals congregate," and spies would be considered criminals, "and she, the innkeeper, does not seize those criminals and lead them off to the palace authorities, that woman innkeeper shall be put to death." So this is a big deal. Rahab's life is on the line. Speaking to the king's messengers, Rahab acknowledges the men had indeed come to her house. They were probably witness there. It would do no good to tell a lie on that point. But she tells them she did not know where they were from, which may or may not be true, adding, "They left before dark, just as the gate was about to be closed, and that if they hurried and pursued them, they would surely overtake them." The messengers follow Rahab's advice and at once start pursuing the spies outside the city. In the meantime, we discover the spies hadn't left the city at all. It was a foil. What happened is Rahab took the spies and hid them on her roof. On the roof, I suppose, to hide them from other people potentially visiting or staying at Rahab's house. And it says hidden under flax, probably so the people with higher vantage points in the city might not be able to look down on them. Why does Rahab do this? Because of what it says in verse 9. She's heard about the miracle of the parting of the Red Sea 40 years earlier. It's not a biblical fiction. Even contemporaries of Moses and Joshua knew that the sea had parted. She knows the Lord had promised the land to Israel. Therefore, the people in the land are trembling. And she's aware of the victory over the two kings east of the Jordan River. She's heard the stories. How important it is for people to hear the stories of what God has done. Stories of miracles. Like how the Lord turned the Nile River into blood before Pharaoh. Like how the Lord parted the Red Sea, but the Egyptian army drowned. Like how the Lord brought water out of a rock. Like how the Lord sweetened the waters of Marah, which previously had been bitter. Like how the Lord caused Aaron's rod to bud. Like how the Lord fed his people 40 years in the wilderness with manna. People need to hear stories of things only God can do. Stories of promise. Have people outside the church heard the abundant promises the Lord has made to those who trust him? A land full of promise. Stories of victory. Rahab has heard the stories of the victories of God's people. Victories over enemies. Victories over sin. Victories over addiction. Victories over unforgiveness. Victories of compassion. Victories of sacrifice and generosity. Victories of obedience. Is the word of our victories preceding us? Besides describing all she has heard, Rahab then professes faith in the Lord. How could she not after what she has heard? Verse 11, for the Lord your God, He is God. He is God in heavens above and on the earth beneath. Meaning, no, the moon isn't God. The moon is not God in the heavens above, as the people of Jericho would have thought. Rahab changes her mind when she hears the stories. The Lord is God, and the Lord is the one who set the moon in its place for light and for signs and for seasons. Meaning, no, this mythical sea creature isn't God. Rahab's namesake, it's not God on the earth. The Lord is. And when the Lord encounters Rahab, he crushes him. His enemies scatter. This confession of Rahab is the high point of the story. It's the high point of the story, I think, both theologically and spatially. Theologically, in the sense that a Canaanite woman, Rahab, is confessing faith in the Lord. How amazing. Right here at the start of the conquest is a Canaanite believing in the Lord. And spatially, it's the high point in the sense the roof is literally the high point of the story. Rahab and the spies go up to the roof where Rahab makes her great confession before going back down the rope, then down again to Joshua. The story goes up and down. Before the spies leave, they make a treaty with Rahab. Our life for theirs, they say. Now, commentators often wrestle with this part. Whether or not the spies should have made a treaty with Rahab. After all, she's a Canaanite. And according to Old Testament law, the Israelites were not, I repeat, were not to make any treaties with the people of the land. Exodus 34:12. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare to you. Exodus 23:32. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. Deuteronomy 7:2 and following. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Judges 2:2. You shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars. It seems clear, doesn't it? The Israelites were to make no covenant with the people of the land. Why then do the spies make a treaty with Rahab? Their life is on the line. But are they breaking the law? No, they're not. Why not? Because the law in each of these passages, it seems to me, is concerned with false religion. The issue is with the religion of the Canaanites, going after their gods, their altars, forsaking the Lord. Israel cannot coexist in the land with false religion in their midst. They need to be a faithful people. The church cannot coexist with false religion in the church. We need to be a faithful people. Eventually it's going to be a snare. Eventually there will be a falling away from Him who made us and loves us. So what do you do when an inhabitant of the land, like Rahab, what do you do when she begins to revere the God of Israel? It's a fascinating dilemma. What then? You do what the Israelite spies do and make a promise to preserve her life. One commentator writes, "The pressure of circumstances apparently brought about a complete rethinking of her loyalties, her life, and its purpose. And when the spies providentially, I believe providentially, arrived in her house, she made the decision to break with her previous suzerain and align herself through these emissaries to the God of Israel." Sometimes we need the pressure of difficult circumstances to bring about a radical change of heart. Maybe we can be praying that these days, right, during the stress of COVID. Rahab then proceeds to help the spies get to safety. Altogether, according to my count, Rahab helps the spies 3 times. First, she helps the spies by redirecting the king's messengers away from her home, away from the city. Then she helps the spies by letting the spies down a rope from her window so they can escape. Finally, she helps the spies by telling the spies to hide in the hills 3 days until their pursuers have returned from looking for them. Are you willing to help others at such a great risk? Willing to help others like Rahab at such a great risk as Rahab helped the spies? I'm reminded of the story of Corrie ten Boom. That's the story that comes to my mind. Corrie ten Boom was a Dutch watchmaker during the Second World War, at a time when the Jews were being dragged away to concentration camps. That's, just awful. So what Corrie ten Boom and her family do is open their home to these Jews who are on the run. Secretly, of course, out of sight of the authorities, probably doing what Rahab did, misdirecting them. They then have this secret room built in their house, just in case the authorities ever did come to search their place, with a warning bell to notify if authorities were coming, alerting them to get their guests into this secret room. As the war went on, Corrie ten Boom's ploy to help the Jews was eventually uncovered, and authorities came to her house and arrested her family. Corrie ten Boom ended up in a concentration camp. Thankfully, the authorities never discovered those who were hiding in the secret room. But like Rahab, she was willing to risk her life to protect innocent people. Whose side are you on? When I was a mission intern in India, my mentor there was a fellow named Mark Clausen. I've been to India 3 times with the Clausen family. They have husband, wife, 3 daughters. They've had a big impact on my life. And he wrote a thesis on Joshua 2. So Joshua 2 is a special passage to me for that reason. And in the thesis, he notes how two different parties, are vying for Rahab's allegiance. On the one side, you have the nation of Israel, its leader who is Joshua, and Joshua's two spies. On the other side, you have the city-state of Jericho, you have the king of Jericho, and you have the king's messengers. Both groups are knocking on Rahab's door. Whose side are you on? How are you exercising your faith? New Testament authors tell us it's not enough to simply profess faith in God. We can't just say, I believe in God, and then do nothing. And they hold Rahab as their example. The writer of Hebrews says, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. James, the half-brother of Jesus, writes, and in the same way, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? Faith works. How can you proclaim the mighty deeds of God? The story of Rahab shows us how important it is to share the stories of miracles and promises and victories in our lives. Who can you reach out to? Rahab was a Canaanite prostitute living on the outskirts of the city, possibly the last person we might think God would reach out to. Yet it's this person of all of the people in Jericho whom the Lord providentially arranges for the spies to encounter. The Lord wants to save Rahab. Now, the story of Rahab doesn't actually end here in Joshua. Though this is the first place we hear of her, it's certainly not the last. For we read about her again in the first chapter of the New Testament, Matthew chapter 1, in Jesus' genealogy, of all places. And we're told Rahab married an Israelite man named Salmon, and they had a child who they called Boaz. Boaz then had a child whom he named Obed. Obed had a child whom he named Jesse, and Jesse had a child whom he named David, Israel's king. It's also in Ruth. If we keep reading further in Matthew's genealogy, we learn that a person named Matthan had a child named Jacob, and Jacob had a child named Joseph. And Joseph was married to Mary, whom Jesus was born, who is called the Christ. No matter where a person is coming from, if that person turns to the Lord, professes faith in the Lord, and serves the Lord, that person is brought right into God's family. And not as a second-rate citizen either. It's not as if God has a special place for native-born Israelites and another place for Canaanite converts. No, in God's family, he brings outsiders and sinners like Rahab into the very center, right into the middle, and he makes them part of the royal family. Can you get any more center than that? Part of David's royal family, part of Jesus' royal family. And notice it's not just Rahab who is saved. We're also told Rahab's father and mother and siblings are also saved. Jesus wants to save whole families. That I think, in the end, God in his wisdom and providence had appointed those two spies, to visit Rahab's house that night, to show that anyone who turns to the Lord can be part of Jesus' family. He wants us part of his family.